Hi. I wanted to talk about spiritual commodification. As I was meditating towards the end of my meditation today, I started reflecting about spiritual commodification in a way that I'd never thought about. And I wanted to talk a little bit about that because I think it's not widely spoken about. Or maybe it is, I'm just not aware of it. Spiritual commodification is when we come to spirituality in a very objectifying way. So we can objectify ourselves because we come to spirituality to beautify ourselves inside or outside, to make us look more attractive to others. Or we come to spirituality because we want to, use some of the principles of spirituality to manifest certain goals in our lives. Now, I understand that it's pretty common to come to spirituality in that kind of objectified way. It can be the beginning of the journey for many people because if it, on some level, it can make us feel safe to step into that. And we don't want to tread too far. We want to tread a little bit in a way that we feel like we have control in a world that we understand. And so it can make us feel really, really safe to start our spiritual journey with spiritual commodification in that way. The risk in that journey is that sometimes we can get stuck in spiritual commodification and we can feel like, this is it. This is the path. This is the end. This is all I had to discover. And we don't kind of get to really access what originally underneath, our pull into spirituality, that part was trying to get something met and it got stuck at this commodification level. And that part is not getting what it wants to be met when we get stuck on that level, stuck on the level of commodification, of objectifying the universe or ourselves. So let me give an example because I think I'm using a lot of abstract, talking abstractly. So let's take an example of a person who, oftentimes it's like some part of them wasn't received or met. And oftentimes this comes as a child. And so they hold this kind of a wound inside them that they're bad. It's often not a conscious wound. It's not conscious at all. For many of us, we don't tend to walk around feeling like, I'm bad. However, underneath, sometimes there are those wounds that fester inside of us. And so we often don't know also what drives us. So let's just say there's this wound that I feel like I'm bad. And some part of me, my ego, tells me that actually my way out of this feeling of I am bad, I am inherently bad. And that's why my mom or my dad or somebody didn't respond to me in the way that I needed. That wound, my ego decides, if I practice generosity, then I will be loved. So, say we come into spirituality, we start to work on generosity. Now, there's a lot of benefits to working on generosity. It's not a bad thing. It's a really good thing, actually. You know, whether it's generosity to the people who are in my life, who I know personally, who get to experience the benefits of me being more generous with them. Or it could be that I'm donating to different causes and I'm really like giving to support other people out there. It's beautiful, actually. There's a, to a certain extent, my heart itself is going to be built in a different way. The more I'm practicing generosity, the more I'm making a positive impact in the world, but also, I'm also feeling good about myself more because I'm being generous. So there's nothing wrong with that. Coming to spirituality and practicing generosity. There's nothing wrong with that. That's beautiful. And as I was saying, if we just get stuck in that part, there can be different things that can happen. So if I get stuck in just commodifying, making myself feel like I'm more attractive because I'm now generous, what happens is that couple different things. Our ego can come in. My ego, we'll make it about me. My ego can come in and say, "Oh, I'm such a good person. I'm generous to everyone. I'm so good. So I'm feeling good about myself, but I'm also creating this identity. So underneath my wound, there was a wound. I'm bad because I experienced certain hurts. And then I covered up that wound with, oh, I'm such a good person. I'm generous. I really give." And some of it can be a salve, but oftentimes the wound underneath the generosity continues to fester. The other alternative is, again, I'm practicing generosity because of this wound, and my ego's come up with, oh, if I'm generous, I'm gonna be loved. The alternative that comes is that, I'm just gonna martyr myself and sacrifice myself to give and give and give. It's a way of being generous so I can feel like I'm lovable. And it's like this container that's not fillable. Like I just keep practicing and practicing and practicing and being more and more and more generous and get more and more and more exhausted because I can't fill that wound completely with generosity. So this is the dangers of getting stuck in spiritual commodification. We build an identity to cover up our wounds, or we continuously do this pattern of what we think the solution is, but we don't get the relief that actually was underneath us coming to spirituality in the first place. What's the alternative to spiritual commodification? Right? That would be the next question if somebody was talking to me about this. So, when we go beyond spiritual commodification, we're now connecting in the moment to our experience, to our hearts, to our bodies, to our souls. We are starting to connect to ourselves that is waiting for us. Just, it's there, but often covered over. It's waiting for us to dust it off, dust off all the stuff that we have covering it, to discover our inherent beauty. You don't have to beautify ourselves. We are beauty. You don't have to value ourselves. We are value. You don't have to, I was going to say, we don't have to be precious. We are precious. So that all of that is waiting to be uncovered, to be lived. Not just uncovered, but to be lived. Why would we not want to go on this journey of uncovering so we can live our beauty, our value, our preciousness? Why not? What would be a barrier to it? One of the barriers to that is what's in the way is our festering wounds. We move through, oftentimes we have to move through our hurts, through our wounds, through the parts of ourselves that we disapprove of, that we want to disown, that we do disown, to get to ourselves, our hearts, our bodies, our souls. So, I hope that this talk about spiritual commodification has been helpful for you. If you have found yourself, maybe you have found yourself actually going from, the market is full of people who will support you in that process of spiritual commodification. And then, if you've moved around a decent amount and been like, oh my gosh, I've done this, I've done this, I've done this, I've done this, but really something isn't changing. I'm still kind of stuck in something. Most likely, it's because, you're moving from area to area to area that's like more spiritual commodification. And you're not actually noticing, you're noticing some benefits, but you're also noticing that, this is just either creating a new identity, it's polishing me, or it's I'm feeling discouraged because I feel like nothing can move me through whatever it is that I'm looking for, even though I've tried so many things. So I just want to invite you to know that even though there is a market full of spiritual commodification services, and entry points really for a lot of people to come into spirituality, that isn't the end of the journey, and that there are people out there, guides, for example, can be a word for it, a guide, a spiritual mentor, a teacher. There are people out there who have, done some of this journeying and who can support you on this path. And, to not give up. That if you find someone who you think they might be great and they end up not being what you expected them to be, to continue to look until you feel like some part of you is like, this may not be what I expected it to look like. The process isn't what I expected it to look like. But I get the sense that this person knows. They've been there. They know something beyond commodification. They have a knowing of themselves. All right, well, thank you for being present. May your journey be supported, and may you find um, your guide.